I am Brooke Wilson, 27 years old now, but 10 years ago, I stood shivering on our porch with one suitcase. My mother Diane smirked, "You will be back begging in a month." My father George slammed the door in my face. I swore I would never return. Now I stare at my phone showing 30 missed calls from them. The tables have completely turned. They need me now desperately. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment, letting me know where you are from, and subscribe to hear how I went from homeless teen to the one person my parents now desperately need. Growing up in our middle-class suburban home in Michigan, I never imagined I would one day be thrown out like yesterday's garbage. Our house was the picture of normalcy from the outside. White picket fence, neatly trimmed lawn, and even a golden retriever named Max. But behind closed doors things were very different. My mother Diane was what people might politely call particular. In reality, she was controlling to the point of suffocation. Everything in our home had its place, including me. Her perfectionism extended beyond household organization into every aspect of my life. My clothes were selected for appropriate appearance. My friends were scrutinized for their family backgrounds, and my grades were expected to be nothing short of perfect. Brooke, anything less than straight, as is simply unacceptable for a Wilson, she would say, examining my report card with hawk-like precision. The Wilsons are destined for medical careers. That has always been our legacy. My father George was physically present, but emotionally absent. A successful accountant who spent most evenings buried in paperwork, he rarely contradicted my mother. When conflicts arose, he would briefly look up from his documents, mutter something about listening to your mother, and disappear back into his world of numbers. His default position was to defer to my mother in all matters regarding my upbringing. Our household rules were strict and non-negotiable. I had to be home by 8:30 on school nights, 9:30 on weekends. My clothing had to be respectable, nothing too bright, too tight, or too expressive. My friends needed to be from good families, meaning academically focused, and from the right socio-economic background. Even my bedroom, supposedly my personal space, was subject to weekly inspections. From an early age, I had shown artistic talent. I would spend hours sketching landscapes, designing characters, and painting whenever I could find the time between study sessions. These moments of creative expression were my only escape from the pressure cooker environment of our home. "Art is a nice hobby," Brooke, my mother, would say dismissively, "but it is not a career path. You need to focus on science and mathematics if you are going to get into a good medical program." The only person who ever encouraged my artistic passion was my grandmother, Eleanor. Mom's mother, ironically, was nothing like her daughter. Grandma Eleanor had been an art teacher before retirement, and she recognized something in my early drawings that others missed. "You have a gift, sweetheart," she would whisper, during our private sketching sessions in her cozy living room. "Do not let anyone tell you to bury it." Grandma Eleanor was my refuge. Every Saturday, I would bike the 3 miles to her small bungalow, where we would spend hours painting, looking through art books, and talking about famous artists. She taught me techniques, bought me quality supplies my parents would never approve of, and most importantly, validated my passion. "Your heart speaks through your brush, Brooke," she told me once. "Some people spend their whole lives searching for their voice. You have already found yours." When I turned 15, my small acts of rebellion began. I stayed out 15 minutes past curfew. I wore brighter colors. I befriended Allison, whose parents were divorced, an automatic disqualification in my mother's rulebook. Each infraction earned me longer lectures and stricter monitoring. Then, when I was 16, Grandma Eleanor passed away after a brief battle with pneumonia. I was devastated. I had lost not only my grandmother, but my ally, my confidant, and the only adult who seemed to truly see me. At the reading of her will, I received a shock. Grandma Eleanor had left me her extensive collection of art supplies and $2,000 in a separate account marked, "For Brooke's art education." My mother was furious, seeing it as her mother undermining her authority from beyond the grave. The tension at home escalated after Grandma's death. Without my weekly escape to her house, I felt trapped. The arguments with my mother grew more frequent and intense. My father retreated further into his work, occasionally emerging to deliver statements like, "Your attitude is making your mother upset, Brooke." Then came the college application season of my junior year. My parents had already planned my applications to 5 prestigious universities with strong pre-med programs. I nodded along in their presence, but secretly began researching art schools. Using the computer at Allison's house, I filled out applications to 3 art programs, including my dream school, the Chicago Institute of Fine Arts. I worked on my portfolio in secret, often staying up until 2 in the morning after my parents had gone to bed. I used the money from Grandma Eleanor to pay the application fees, knowing my parents would never agree to sign the checks. The deception lasted 4 months, until one afternoon when my mother came home early from her charity committee meeting. I had forgotten to clear the browser history after checking the status of my art school applications on our home computer. The browser was still open to the Chicago Institute of Fine Arts admissions page when she sat down to check her email. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice deadly quiet, as I walked through the door from school. I froze in the entryway, my backpack suddenly feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. "I asked you a question, Brooke. What is this website doing on our computer?" I applied to some art schools, I admitted, deciding in that moment that I was tired of hiding. "You did what?" Her voice rose sharply. "Without discussing it with us. Without our permission. Without our signatures." "Grandma Eleanor left me money for art education. I used that for the application fees." My mother's face contorted with rage. "Your grandmother had no right to interfere with our family decisions. This is absolutely unacceptable." That night began a new chapter of escalating arguments about my future. Each evening devolved into shouting matches about my throwing away my potential and disrespecting family traditions. My father unusually began to take a more active role in these arguments, emphasizing the financial security of medicine versus the starvation wages of an artist. "We have invested 17 years in giving you every advantage," my mother would say. "We will not stand by and watch you throw it all away on a childish fantasy." I held firm, emboldened by Grandma Eleanor's posthumous support and the small taste of independence I had experienced through the secret application process. Little did I know that these arguments were merely the prelude to the night that would change everything. The morning of April 15th started like any other Tuesday. I got up, went to school, sat through my classes, thinking about the art assignment I would work on later. I had no idea that by nightfall, I would be homeless. That afternoon, I received an email that changed everything. The Chicago Institute of Fine Arts had not only accepted me but offered a partial scholarship based on my portfolio. I was ecstatic, reading the email 10 times. In the school library, tears of joy streaming down my face. Allison hugged me tightly when I showed her. "You did it, Brooke. This is amazing," she squealed. For a brief, naive moment, I thought that perhaps this external validation, this proof that my art had real value, might change my parents' minds. I decided to tell them that night, to lay all my cards on the table and hope they could see how important this was to me. Dinner that evening was typical. My mother's perfectly prepared pot roast, my father's distracted presence, and stilted conversation about appropriate topics, like the neighbors' landscaping choices, and my father's golf game. I waited until we had finished eating before taking a deep breath. "I need to tell you both something important." I began, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. "I applied to the Chicago Institute of Fine Arts, and I found out today that I got accepted. They even offered me a scholarship." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother slowly placed her fork down on her plate, the small clink sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet room. My father actually looked up from his phone, his attention fully on me, for perhaps the first time in years. "You applied without our knowledge?" my father asked, his tone unnervingly calm. "Yes. I used Grandma's money for the application fees." "And you were planning to attend this art school?" My mother pronounced art school like it was a particularly disgusting disease. Yes, it is what I want. It is what I am good at. The scholarship shows that they think I have real talent. My mother's face hardened. This is absolutely out of the question. We have already discussed your attendance at State University's pre-med program. The deposit is paid. Your future is set. That is your future for me, not mine, I said, surprising myself with my steadiness. You are 17 years old, my father interjected. You do not get to make these kinds of decisions independently. I will be 18 in 3 months, I countered, and then I can decide for myself. My mother stood up her chair, scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. As long as you live under this roof, you will abide by our rules and our plans for your education. Then maybe I should not live under this roof anymore, I said the words, tumbling out before I could stop them. What followed was the most explosive argument we had ever had. My mother screamed about ingratitude and family obligation. My father, usually so disengaged, thundered about financial realities and practical considerations. Do you have any idea how competitive the art world is? He demanded. Do you think your little drawings will pay the bills? Will your paintings cover health insurance, retirement, a mortgage? Thousands of talented artists are waiting tables right now, my mother added. Is that what you want for yourself? To throw away a guaranteed successful career for a pipe dream? It is not a pipe dream if it is what I love, I argued. I do not want to be a doctor. I have never wanted that. That is your dream, not mine. After everything we have sacrificed for you, my mother hissed, this is how you repay us, with disrespect and delusion. The argument spiraled, growing more personal and vicious with each exchange. Words were said that could never be taken back. My mother called me selfish, ungrateful, delusional. My father said I was throwing my life away, that I would end up a failure. Then came the ultimatum. This ends now, my mother said, her voice suddenly cold and controlled. You have 2 choices. You will commit to the pre-med program we have selected, give up this art school nonsense, and abide by our rules. Or you can leave. I stared at her, not quite believing what I was hearing. Leave? What do you mean? If you are adult enough to make these decisions, against our wishes, you are adult enough to live with the consequences, my father said. If you choose this art path, you choose to do it without our support, financial or otherwise. I looked between them, searching for any sign of bluffing. There was none. You would kick me out, your own daughter. My voice had become small, childlike. We would be acknowledging your choice to leave the path we have set for you, my mother clarified, as if this semantic difference mattered. Fine, I whispered, then louder. Fine, I choose art. I choose my own path. Then you choose to do it somewhere else, my father said flatly. My mother's face showed no emotion. You have 30 minutes to pack what you need. Anything you leave behind we will consider abandoned. I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. Then the reality crashed over me, and I ran upstairs to my bedroom. With shaking hands, I pulled my largest suitcase from the closet and began throwing in essentials, clothes, toiletries, my sketchbooks, and the special art supplies from Grandma Eleanor. I grabbed my laptop phone charger and the framed photo of me and Grandma. As I packed frantically, tears streaming down my face, I could hear my parents talking in low voices downstairs. Not once did either of them come up to check on me, to see if I was okay, to try to work out a compromise. 28 minutes later, I dragged my suitcase downstairs. My parents stood in the foyer, my mother's arms crossed, my father checking his watch. I need to get my money from the bank tomorrow, I said, trying to sound practical, despite my tear-stained face. Your regular account is your money, my father acknowledged, but your college fund remains under our control until you pursue an approved degree. I nodded numbly, not having the energy to argue further. I had about $800 in my personal account, savings from birthday money and odd jobs. That plus Grandma Eleanor's $2,000 would have to sustain me. I walked to the door, half expecting, hoping, that one of them would stop me, would say this had gone too far, that we could talk more tomorrow. Neither moved. As I stepped onto the porch, my mother's parting words cut deep. "You will be back begging in a month," she said with a cold smirk. "Real life is not as romantic as your drawings make it seem." My father simply shook his head in disappointment and closed the door firmly behind me. The sound of the lock turning felt like a physical blow. I stood there in the chilly April evening, suitcase in hand, utterly alone. The reality of my situation began to sink in. I was 17 years old with limited funds, no housing, no job, and 3 months left of high school. Tears mixed with the light drizzle that had begun to fall. But beneath the fear and shock, a spark of determination flickered. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me fail. With cold fingers, I pulled out my phone and called Allison. "Can I stay at your place tonight?" I asked, my voice breaking. My parents kicked me out. "Oh my God, Brooke. Of course. Come right over," she responded without hesitation. As I began the 12-block walk to Allison's house, dragging my suitcase behind me, I made a silent promise to myself I would never go back begging. No matter how hard things got, I would find a way to survive and pursue my dreams. They had closed their door on me, and I would close my heart to them in return. The first week at Allison's house passed in a blur. Her parents were shocked when I arrived on their doorstep with my suitcase and explained what had happened. They immediately set me up on their living room couch and assured me I could stay while I sorted things out. I could tell they expected this to be temporary, that surely my parents would come to their senses in a day or two. They did not. Mrs. Parker, Allison's mom, called my parents the next morning. From the kitchen, I could hear her voice rising in disbelief. "She is 17, Diane, still in high school. No, I understand having disagreements, but, well, yes, we can keep her for now, but..." Hello, she hung up, looking stunned. They hung up on me. I was not surprised, but the Parkers were. They had known my parents for years through school functions and neighborhood events. They had never seen the private face of my family dynamics. "You can stay as long as you need," Mr. Parker assured me, though I could see the concern in his eyes. Their apartment had only 2 bedrooms, one for them and one for Allison. The living room couch was not a long-term solution. That first week, I focused on practical matters. I went to the bank and withdrew my $823.17. I contacted the executor of Grandma Eleanor's will to access the $2,000 she had left me. I continued going to school, keeping my head down and trying to avoid gossip, though word inevitably spread that something had happened in the Wilson household. In the evenings, I searched for jobs online using the Parkers' computer. I had no work experience beyond babysitting. Every entry-level position seemed to want previous experience, the eternal catch, 22 of job hunting. I applied anyway, to fast food restaurants, retail stores, coffee shops, anywhere that might hire a high school student. By the end of the first week, the weight of my situation was becoming clear. My savings would not last long. The Parkers were kind, but clearly strained by having an extra person in their small apartment. I needed income, and more permanent housing fast. The second week brought my first break. The Green Bean, a local coffee shop, called me for an interview. The manager, a 30-something woman named Lily with bright red hair and multiple ear piercings, took one look at my situation and gave me a chance. 20 hours a week to start, minimum wage plus tips. "We will work around your school schedule," she said, sliding the paperwork across the counter. I nearly cried with relief. It was not much, but it was something. With a job secured, I had to address the housing situation. As kind as the Parkers were, I could see the strain my presence was putting on them. Their apartment was small, and having someone sleeping in the common area meant no privacy for anyone. "My cousin Taylor has a finished basement. She rents out sometimes," Allison suggested at the end of my second week of homelessness. "It is not fancy, but it is cheap. Like $300 a month cheap." The basement room was indeed not fancy. A single mattress on the floor, a small dresser, a lamp, and a mini fridge. The bathroom was shared with the main house. But it was private, and at $300 a month, it was within my new budget if I was careful. I moved in immediately, thanking the Parkers profusely for their help. My new daily routine quickly established itself. Wake up at 5 a.m. Shower. Before Taylor and her roommates needed the bathroom work. The morning shift at Green Bean from 6 to 10, go to school from 10:30 to 3:30. Return to Green Bean for the closing shift from 4 to 8, then home to do homework until I collapsed from exhaustion. The physical and emotional toll was immense. One particularly difficult day during my third week of homelessness, I found myself having a breakdown in the public bathroom at school. I sat in the stall, trying to muffle my sobs, overwhelmed by exhaustion and the unfairness of it all. I was 17. I should have been worrying about prom and final exams, not whether I could afford both dinner and laundry in the same week. It was in that bathroom that I first truly grieved, for my lost childhood home, for parents who had chosen their vision of my future over my actual presence in their lives, for the normal teenage experiences I was missing. I allowed myself 20 minutes of tears before splashing cold water on my face and returning to class, my mask of composure back in place. The Green Bean became more than just a workplace. It became a lifeline, not only for the income but for the structure and community it provided. Lily became something of a mentor, showing me the ropes, not just of coffee making, but of adult independence. "You need to open your own bank account without your parents on it," she advised one slow afternoon, "and start building credit as soon as you turn 18. Trust me, it matters later." The regular customers also became a source of stability. There was the morning crowd of business people who learned my name and tipped well. There were the afternoon students who sometimes shared notes from classes I had to miss. And there was Patricia, an elderly woman who came in every day at 2 p.m. for her single cup of Earl Grey tea. Patricia noticed things. She noticed when I looked particularly tired, or when I wore the same clothes 2 days in a row because I had not had time to do laundry. She noticed when I skipped lunch to save money. "You remind me of myself at your age," she told me one day, in my 4th week of homelessness, stubborn and independent to a fault. We began talking regularly during her tea time, and I found myself sharing bits of my story. She listened without judgment, occasionally offering practical advice, but never platitudes about family reconciliation. Then, as my first month of independence was coming to a close, the month my mother had predicted would break me, Patricia made an unexpected offer. "My house is too big for just me since my husband passed," she said matter-of-factly. "I have a spare room gathering dust. You could stay there, help with some chores, keep an old woman company, and look after my cat when I visit my sister. No rent, just household contribution." I stared at her speechless. "Why would you do that for me? You barely know me." Patricia smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. "I know enough. Sometimes people need a bridge to get from one part of life to another. Consider me your bridge." That evening I moved my few possessions from Taylor's basement to Patricia's spare room, a real bedroom with a real bed, a desk and a window that caught the morning light perfectly for sketching. As I unpacked my suitcase for the second time that month, I realized something profound. I had made it through the first month without crawling back to my parents. In the quiet of my new room, I allowed myself a small private celebration. I had survived. I was still in school. I had a job. I had found housing. I had made it through the month my mother said would break me. I was going to be okay. Living with Patricia changed everything. Unlike Taylor's basement, which had been merely a place to sleep, Patricia's home became a genuine sanctuary. The house was a charming old Victorian with creaky floors and character, located just a mile from the Green Bean and 2 miles from my high school. My room had built-in bookshelves, a comfortable twin bed with a handmade quilt, and most importantly, a sturdy desk, positioned perfectly beneath the window, where the natural light was ideal for drawing. "This used to be my daughter's room," Patricia explained, as she helped me settle in. "She lives in Arizona now with her family. She would be pleased to know it is being used by another young woman with ambition. Patricia, I soon learned, had been an English professor before retirement. Her house was filled with books on every subject imaginable, and she had a studio space in the converted garage where she did pottery. She understood the creative drive in a way my parents never had. Our arrangement quickly fell into a comfortable pattern. I continued working at the Green Bean and attending school. In exchange for room and board, I helped with household chores, grocery shopping, and tending to Aristotle Patricia's imperious orange tabby cat. On Thursdays, when Patricia had her standing mahjong game with friends, I cooked dinner for us both. "You need to focus on finishing high school strongly," Patricia insisted when I offered to pay rent. "Save your money for college and your future. That is the best way to repay any kindness." With stable housing secured, I could finally think beyond day-to-day survival. The first priority was completing my senior year and obtaining my diploma. Though my parents had kicked me out, they had not withdrawn me from school, likely to avoid questions from authorities about a minor no longer living at home. My counselor, Mrs. Caldwell, called me into her office in early May, about 6 weeks after I had left home. "Your teachers have noticed some changes, Brooke," she said carefully. "Absences, late assignments, falling asleep in class. Is everything all right at home?" I hesitated, then decided on honesty. I do not live at home anymore. My parents and I had a fundamental disagreement about my future. I am working nearly full-time while finishing school. To my surprise, Mrs. Caldwell did not seem shocked. "I suspected something had happened. Your mother canceled your college planning session last month, and was quite vague about the reasons." I explained the situation, the art school acceptance, my parents' ultimatum, and my current living arrangements. "That cannot have been easy," she said, when I finished. "But you are handling it with remarkable maturity. Let us talk about how to get you through these final weeks successfully." Mrs. Caldwell became an unexpected ally. She helped arrange a modified schedule for my remaining classes, and spoke with my teachers about flexibility for assignments. She also introduced me to resources I had not known existed. "The Chicago Institute has offered you a partial scholarship, but you will need additional financial aid," she explained, pulling out forms for independent student status. "Normally, students under 24 need parental information, but there are exceptions for unusual circumstances. Yours definitely qualifies." With her guidance, I navigated the complex world of FAFSA forms, independent student documentation, and additional scholarship applications. She even helped me apply for a special completion grant from the school district's Foundation for Students Facing Hardship. By the time graduation approached in June, I had secured enough financial aid to make the Chicago Institute affordable when combined with my savings and part-time work. I would need to continue working throughout college, but it was doable. No one from my family attended my graduation ceremony. Patricia came cheering loudly when my name was called. Lily closed the Green Bean early so she and the other employees could attend. Allison and her parents were there too, proudly taking photos as if I were their own daughter. As I stood in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, I felt a complex mix of emotions, pride in my accomplishment, gratitude for my new support system, and a hollow ache for the family members whose empty seats signified a painful absence. That summer, I increased my hours at the Green Bean to full-time and picked up weekend work selling my artwork at the local farmers market. Patricia had helped me create a display system for my drawings and watercolors, and to my surprise, people actually bought them, not enough to live on, but enough to add to my college fund and validate my artistic aspirations. "You have a distinct style," an older gentleman told me after purchasing a landscape. "Very evocative. Keep developing it." Each small success strengthened my resolve. Each painting sold was a tiny vindication of the choice I had made. In August, I received an unexpected call from Mrs. Caldwell. "Brooke, I have been speaking with the admissions office at the Chicago Institute," she began. "They have a special situation with another scholarship that had been allocated, but the recipient chose another school. They asked if I knew of any talented students with financial need who might be eligible. My heart raced as she continued explaining. This additional scholarship would cover most of my remaining tuition gap if I could submit an expanded portfolio within the week. I spent the next 5 days in a creative frenzy, selecting my best existing work and creating several new pieces specifically for the application. 2 weeks later, the official letter arrived confirming the additional scholarship. I would still need to work part-time and take out a small loan, but college was now a financial reality rather than just a dream. Patricia celebrated the news by taking me to a proper art supply store, not the craft section of the department store, but a professional shop where serious artists purchased their materials. She bought me my first set of professional-grade paints, brushes, and canvases as an early graduation present. Every artist needs proper tools, she said, simply when I protested the expense. As summer wound down and my departure for Chicago approached, I established the foundations for my new independent life. I opened a separate bank account with no parental access. I learned basic budgeting from Patricia, who had lived through lean times herself. I mastered simple economical cooking and basic household repairs. I found a student housing share in Chicago that fit my budget and secured a transfer to a green bean location near campus. "You are building your life from scratch," Patricia observed one evening as we shared dinner on her back porch. "Most people never have to do that until much later, if ever. It is painful, but powerful." There were difficult moments amidst the progress. My first Christmas away from family was particularly hard, though Patricia included me in her own family gathering the holiday, amplified the reality of my situation. I found myself remembering childhood traditions, decorating the tree with my mother, my father's annual reading of The Night Before Christmas, and feeling their absence acutely. Yet even in those moments of grief, I was creating new traditions and connections. Allison came home from her first semester at State University, and we spent a day baking cookies in Patricia's kitchen, flour fights included. The Green Bean staff held a potluck family dinner for employees without local family. Lily gave me a set of professional sketchbooks, with a note that read, "For the next Frida Kahlo." These people, Patricia, Allison, Lily, Mrs. Caldwell, became my chosen family. They supported my dreams rather than attempting to reshape them. They offered guidance without control, advice without ultimatums. Through them I learned that family could be created as well as born into. By the time I packed my belongings into Patricia's car for the drive to Chicago in late August, I had not spoken to my parents in 4 months. I had sent them a brief email with my new contact information, feeling it was the responsible thing to do, but had received no response. I told myself I had made peace with their absence in my life, though the twinge in my heart when I thought of them suggested otherwise. As Patricia and I pulled away from the house that had become my true home, I looked back one last time. "Are you ready?" Patricia asked, understanding the weight of the moment. "Yes," I said, turning to face forward. "I am ready for whatever comes next." My first day at the Chicago Institute of Fine Arts was overwhelming in the best possible way. The campus vibrated with creative energy, students sketching in courtyards, art installations in unexpected corners, the smell of oil paints and clay drifting from open studio doors. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language, who understood the compulsion to create. "This is where I belong," I whispered to myself as I found my way to my first class, Introduction to Color Theory. The transition to college life came with significant challenges. While most freshmen worried about homesickness and communal bathrooms, I juggled a full course load with 25 hours a week at the Chicago Green Bean. My student housing situation, a converted attic room in a house shared with 4 other art students, was far from luxurious. The ceiling sloped so dramatically that I could stand upright in only half the space, and winter revealed its poor insulation. Yet these hardships felt different from my initial homeless period. They were challenges on a path I had chosen, stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. My first semester grades reflected my determination, straight as despite my work schedule. My foundation drawing professor Dr. Winters took particular interest in my work. "Your technical skills are excellent," she noted during a portfolio review, "but what stands out is the emotional authenticity in your compositions. There is a maturity here that is unusual in freshman work." I did not tell her that this maturity had been hard-won through premature independence. Instead, I channeled those experiences into my art. My mid-year project, a series of interior spaces rendered in stark contrast between light and shadow, won the department's Emerging Artist Award. By my sophomore year, I had established a reputation as both talented and tenacious. I rarely participated in the social aspects of college life, parties, football games, impromptu road trips, but I was respected for my dedication. While classmates complained about early morning classes, I had already been up for hours working the opening shift at Green Bean before arriving travel mug in hand. It was during my sophomore year that I met Michael. He was a junior studying photography, and we met when he came into Green Bean every morning for 3 weeks straight, always ordering the same thing: large black coffee, no room for cream, and leaving an oversized tip. "You know that tip could buy you something more interesting than plain black coffee," I finally said one quiet morning. He smiled, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "The coffee is just an excuse to see the interesting barista." Our relationship developed slowly. Both of us were serious about our art and our education, neither willing to let romance derail our goals. We studied together in the library, critiqued each other's work honestly, and supported each other's artistic development. Weekend dates consisted of gallery openings and museum exhibitions where we could discuss technique and composition. For the first time, I experienced what a healthy relationship could be, and supportive, without being controlling, close, without being suffocating. Michael became not just my boyfriend, but my best friend and creative collaborator. In my junior year, everything accelerated. I secured a coveted internship at Meridian Design, a boutique graphic design agency in downtown Chicago. The position was unpaid, which meant adding another part-time job as a university art lab monitor to my already packed schedule, but the experience was invaluable. "You have a natural eye for commercial application, Marion," the creative director told me during my mid-internship review. "You understand how to make art functional, without sacrificing its soul." The internship led to occasional paid freelance projects and logo designs for small businesses, layout work for local publications, which supplemented my coffee shop income. For the first time since leaving home, I began to have a small financial cushion beyond immediate necessities. Meanwhile, my personal artwork was evolving. My junior thesis project, a multimedia series exploring concepts of home and belonging, received recognition beyond campus when it was selected for inclusion in a citywide Emerging Artists exhibition. My graduation from the Chicago Institute approached without any communication from my parents. I had sent them a formal announcement, more out of a sense of closure than expectation, but received no response. Patricia drove up for the ceremony, as did Allison, who had just completed her own degree in education. Michael's family, who had virtually adopted me during holidays, filled an entire row of seats, cheering loudly when I crossed the stage. As I stood with my diploma scanning the audience out of habit for faces that I knew would not be there, I realized that the ache had dulled. The absence of my parents was a fact rather than a fresh wound. I had built a life they had no part in, achieved success. They had never witnessed become a person they would not recognize. My professional life gained momentum immediately after graduation. Marion from Meridian Design offered me a full-time position as a junior designer with benefits, a significant step up from barista work. My first real adult job came with a salary that, while modest by industry standards, felt like untold wealth after years of careful budgeting. My relationship with Michael evolved as well. Shortly after graduation, he proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan, presenting me with a simple silver band he had designed himself. "I want to build a life with you," he said as waves crashed against the shore. "A life where we both get to pursue our passions and support each other." I said yes without hesitation, feeling for once that my future was expanding rather than contracting. We began planning a small wedding for the following spring, saving for a down payment on a condo, discussing which neighborhood would best suit two working artists. Then came the conversation that changed everything. "Have you thought about inviting your parents to the wedding?" Michael asked one evening as we reviewed potential venues online. The question caught me off guard. Why would I? They are your parents, Brooke. This is a major life event. They chose not to be part of my life, I reminded him. They have made no effort to contact me in 4 years. Have you made any effort to contact them? He countered. This led to a series of increasingly tense discussions about family forgiveness and the future. Michael, who came from a close-knit family with normal, healthy disagreements, could not understand my complete severance from my parents. "You cannot just pretend they do not exist forever," he argued. "What about when we have children? Would you keep your own children from knowing their grandparents?" If those grandparents were toxic. Yes, absolutely, I responded. The wedding planning stalled, as this fundamental difference in our values became apparent. Michael believed in reconciliation and second chances. I had learned the hard way about self-protection and boundaries. Neither of us was wrong exactly, but we were irreconcilably different on this crucial point. 3 months after his proposal, we made the painful decision to end our engagement. We loved each other, but our visions for family life were incompatible. Michael returned to his hometown of Milwaukee after accepting a teaching position there. I threw myself into my work at Meridian, channeling my heartbreak into creativity. 6 months later, an unexpected opportunity arose. One of Meridian's biggest clients, North Star Publishing, was launching a new lifestyle magazine and needed an in-house design team. They were impressed with the work I had done on their corporate materials and offered me a position as senior designer, a significant promotion with a substantial salary increase. The catch: the position was in their main office, located not in Chicago, but in New York. At 25 years old, I faced another pivotal decision: stay in the city that had nurtured my rebirth, where I had friends and community, or take a leap into the unknown for career advancement. After a week of deliberation, I accepted the New York position. Patricia was supportive as always, though sad to have me moving further away. "Life expands through brave choices," she said during our goodbye dinner. "You have never shied away from those." My first year in New York was both exhilarating and isolating. The pace and pressure of the publishing world were intense, but I thrived under the creative challenges. My designs for the magazine's inaugural issues received industry attention, and my salary allowed me to rent a small but private apartment in Brooklyn, the first time I had ever lived completely alone. While building my professional reputation, I also continued my personal artistic practice, renting studio space in a converted warehouse shared by other artists. My work began selling in small galleries, supplementing my design income and building my name in fine art circles. As my confidence and financial stability grew, I made a bold decision to launch my own design studio. At 27, with 6 years of professional experience and an impressive client list, I left North Star to establish Wilson Creative. The first months were terrifying, living on savings, working around the clock to deliver projects, learning the business side of creativity. The gamble paid off. My reputation for distinctive, effective design brought a steady stream of clients. Within a year, I hired my first employee, a recent design school graduate, who reminded me of myself. 6 months later, I added a project manager and a web specialist. Wilson Creative expanded from brand identity into full-service creative development. My financial situation transformed dramatically. I was no longer the homeless teenager, stretching minimum wage, or the struggling student eating ramen for dinner. By 27, I owned my apartment, had a healthy investment portfolio, and could afford luxuries that once seemed unimaginable: international travel, original artwork by artists I admired, custom furniture for my home office. This success brought a profound sense of validation. I had proven my parents wrong in every possible way. I had not only survived, but thrived pursuing the path they had deemed worthless. I had built financial security greater than theirs through my impractical artistic talent. Yet despite this objective success, I still struggled with the emotional legacy of their rejection. I worked with a therapist, Dr. Harrison, to address the abandonment issues that affected my relationships and my workaholic tendencies. Financial success and professional achievement are important, Dr. Harrison noted in one session. But have you allowed yourself to heal the wounded 17-year-old who still lives inside you? This question stayed with me, prompting deeper reflection on what true success and happiness meant. I had proven my worth to the world, but perhaps not yet to myself. As my 28th birthday approached, I felt I had finally achieved a balanced life. My business was thriving, but no longer consumed every waking hour. I had developed close friendships in New York and maintained connections with my chosen family from Michigan and Chicago. I had even begun dating again, nothing serious, but open to possibilities. I had no idea that this carefully constructed peace was about to be disrupted by a name I had not seen in my inbox for nearly a decade, Diane Wilson. The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning as I reviewed design proofs with my team. I did not notice it until hours later, when I was clearing my inbox before heading home. The subject line was simply, "Hello," but the sender name stopped my breath, Diane Wilson. My mother had not contacted me in 10 years. Not when I graduated high school or college. Not when my work was featured in design publications. Not on any birthday or holiday since the night she watched me walk away with one suitcase. With shaking hands, I opened the message. Dear Brooke, I hope this email finds you well. Your father and I have been thinking about you and wondering how your life has unfolded. We have seen your name associated with some impressive design work online. Perhaps too much time has passed, but we would like to reconnect if you are open to it. We have regrets about how things ended between us. Please let us know if you would be willing to talk. Mom. The casual mom signature after 10 years of silence felt jarring, almost offensive. The message itself was brief, vague, and contained no actual apology for mention of regrets, without specifying what they regretted or acknowledging any wrongdoing. I stared at the screen until the words blurred, then closed my laptop without responding. That night I experienced my first panic attack in years. Heart racing, chest tight, unable to catch my breath. I called my therapist, Dr. Harrison, the next morning and scheduled an emergency session. What are you feeling right now about this contact? She asked after I had explained the situation. Angry, confused, suspicious, I replied then after a pause, curious. All valid reactions, she nodded. The question is not whether you should respond, but what boundaries you need, regardless of how you proceed. Over the next 2 sessions we discussed potential approaches. I could ignore the email entirely. I could send a brief acknowledgement without opening the door to further communication. I could respond with questions about their sudden interest in reconnecting. Each option carried emotional risks and benefits. Whatever you decide it should be on your timeline, not theirs, Dr. Harrison emphasized. Their convenience does not take priority over your healing. While I deliberated, I began a quiet investigation. Through social media and connections from my hometown, I pieced together what had happened with my parents over the past decade. My father's accounting firm had faced a lawsuit 3 years ago, something about financial improprieties with a major client. The legal battle had drained their resources and ultimately resulted in the firm's bankruptcy. My mother had been diagnosed with breast cancer the previous year, requiring expensive treatments partially covered by insurance. They had downsized from the family home to a much smaller condo. This context raised an uncomfortable question. Were they reaching out because they genuinely regretted their actions, or because they needed something from me now that their circumstances had changed? 2 weeks after the initial email having not yet responded, I received another. Brooke, I understand your hesitation in responding. We did not part on good terms. Your father has had some business difficulties, and I have had health challenges. It has given us perspective on what truly matters in life. Family matters. We would very much like to hear from you. Mom. Again, the message stopped short of a genuine apology or acknowledgement of the harm they had caused. The mention of their difficulties now seemed strategic rather than coincidental. I drafted several responses but sent none of them. Each attempt felt either too vulnerable or too harsh. Instead, I focused on protecting my peace and consulting trusted allies. Patricia, now in her 70s, but sharp as ever, offered her wisdom during our weekly phone call. People rarely change fundamentally, she said. They may change behaviors when circumstances force them to, but their core remains consistent. The question is whether you need anything from this reconnection. Allison, still my closest friend, despite the geographical distance, was more blunt. They kicked you out when you needed them. Now they are reaching out when they might need you. Convenient timing. No. A third email arrived a month after the first. This one, with more urgency. Brooke, please acknowledge that you are receiving these messages. We are your parents, and we are concerned. We have important matters to discuss. Family matters that cannot be resolved without communication. Please call us at your earliest convenience. Mom and Dad. The addition of Dad to the signature, and the increasingly entitled tone, triggered my deepest insecurities. For a brief, terrible moment, I felt 17 again, powerless, desperate, afraid. Then I remembered who I was, now a successful business owner, financially independent, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. I finally sent a brief, controlled response. I have received your emails. I am not ready for phone communication. If you have specific matters to discuss, you may explain them in writing, and I will consider whether I wish to engage further. Their reply came within hours. We would prefer to discuss these matters in person or by phone. Some things are too complicated for email. Could we perhaps visit you in New York? The suggestion that they would enter my hard-won safe space sent another wave of anxiety through me. I declined the visit firmly, but asked again what specific family matters required discussion. What followed was a series of increasingly transparent communications. My mother's cancer treatments had depleted their savings. My father's bankruptcy had left them with significant debt. They were struggling to afford their mortgage payments on the condo. They needed family support during this difficult time. The financial motivation behind their sudden desire to reconnect became undeniable. Rather than acknowledging this directly, however, they wrapped their requests in emotional manipulation, references to blood ties, parental love, and family obligation. The situation escalated when my cousin Emily called me unexpectedly. I hate getting involved, she began uncomfortably, but Aunt Diane asked me to reach out. They are in really bad shape financially, Brooke. The medical bills are overwhelming them, and Uncle George cannot find decent work at his age after the bankruptcy scandal. Did they ask you to tell me they need money? I asked directly. Emily's silence was answer enough. They should have the courage to ask me themselves instead of triangulating through family, I said. More relatives began contacting me. An aunt, another cousin, even my father's brother, whom I had barely known growing up. Each conversation followed the same pattern: expressions of how wonderful it was to reconnect, followed by casual mentions of my parents' difficulties and what a blessing it would be if I could help out the family. The pressure intensified when my parents began calling my personal phone multiple times daily. I had never given them this number, which meant they had obtained it through family members or possibly hired someone to find it. I let the calls go to voicemail, but the frequency became harassing. After 2 weeks of this escalation, I consulted a lawyer about my options. She advised me on potential steps from a formal cease and desist letter to blocking their numbers and documenting the pattern of contact if I needed to pursue legal protection. Before we go that route, she suggested you might want to have one clear conversation establishing boundaries. Sometimes, people need explicit statements of limits. I decided to listen to one voicemail, hoping it might provide clarity. My father's voice, older and more strained than I remembered, filled my ear. "Brooke, this is your father. We need to speak with you urgently. Your mother's medical treatments are not fully covered by insurance, and we are facing potential foreclosure on the condo. We have exhausted all other options. We need your help. We are your parents regardless of past disagreements. Please call us back." Almost immediately after, another voicemail arrived from my mother. "Brooke, please. We know you have become successful. We have seen your company website and the articles about your work. We need your help. We have nowhere else to turn. We are begging you to call us back." The word begging struck me with particular force. 10 years earlier, my mother had smirked that I would be back begging in a month. Now the roles were completely reversed. I sat with this realization for several days, processing the complex emotions it triggered. There was a certain vindication in the role reversal, but it brought no joy. Instead, I felt a deep sadness for the relationship that could have been, for the support that should have flowed both ways in a healthy family. After consultation with Dr. Harrison, I made my decision. I would meet with my parents once, in a neutral location, with clear boundaries established in advance. Not to reconcile, but to address the situation directly and establish permanent boundaries. The meeting was scheduled for the following month, when I would be in Michigan visiting Patricia. I would give them one opportunity to speak their piece, and I would respond on my terms. Whatever happened, I would walk away with closure rather than open wounds. As I prepared for this meeting, I felt not the desperate longing of an abandoned child, but the steady resolve of a woman who had built herself from the ground up, a woman who could face her past without being consumed by it. The cafe I chose for our meeting was deliberately public, a place where voices would need to stay measured, where dramatic scenes would be constrained by social convention. I arrived 30 minutes early, selecting a corner table with a clear view of the entrance and exit. My therapist had suggested bringing a grounding object, so I wore the silver bracelet Patricia had given me when I left for college, a tangible reminder of the family I had chosen. When they walked through the door, I almost did not recognize them. 10 years had aged my parents dramatically. My father's confident posture had collapsed into a slight stoop. His hair, once dark and full, was now thin and completely gray. My mother had lost weight, her face gaunt beneath carefully applied makeup. The cancer treatments had left her with a short silver pixie cut instead of the shoulder-length brown hair I remembered. They spotted me immediately moving toward my table, with an eagerness that made me instinctively straighten my spine. I had decided not to stand when they arrived, a small but deliberate choice to maintain my physical space. "Brooke," my mother breathed, reaching toward me before stopping herself when I did not extend my hand. "You look wonderful." "Very professional," my father added, taking in my tailored blazer and the portfolio I had deliberately placed on the table, a visual reminder of the successful career they had once dismissed. "Please sit," I said, gesturing to the chairs across from me. No hugs, no pretense of familial warmth. An awkward silence fell as they settled themselves. I waited, having decided in advance not to initiate the conversation they had so insistently requested. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," my mother finally began. "It means a lot." I nodded, but remained silent. "You have done very well for yourself," my father said, attempting a smile. "We have read about your design firm, quite impressive." "Yes," I acknowledged. "It is." Another silence stretched between us. I could see them struggling with the reality that I was not going to make this easy. I was not going to fall into the daughter role they remembered where I worked, to smooth over uncomfortable moments. "We owe you an apology," my mother said suddenly, her voice catching. "What we did was wrong. Kicking you out, cutting you off completely. It was wrong." It was the first genuine acknowledgement I had heard from either of them. I studied her face, searching for sincerity beyond the convenient timing. "Why now?" I asked directly. "It has been 10 years. Why the sudden realization?" My father shifted uncomfortably. "Life has a way of teaching hard lessons sometimes." "Through bankruptcy and cancer," I stated flatly. "Not through the homeless teenager you created." They both flinched at my bluntness. "We know you have every right to be angry," my mother said, tears forming in her eyes. "We failed you as parents. I was too controlling, too fixated on a specific path for you. Your father was too passive, too unwilling to stand up to me. We both regret it deeply." "When did this regret begin?" "Exactly?" I asked. "Was it before or after Dad's legal troubles?" "Before or after your diagnosis?" "That is not fair," my father protested weakly. "No, it is a legitimate question," I countered. "You made no attempt to contact me for 8 years. Not when I graduated high school or college. Not when I started my career. The timing of your renewed interest in my life coincides precisely with your financial difficulties." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "We deserve that. But our regret is real, regardless of when or why it finally broke through our pride." "I know about the medical bills and the foreclosure risk," I said directly. "Cousin Emily told me. And I heard your voicemails. You need money, and you have decided that I am your solution." They exchanged a look, clearly uncomfortable with my directness. "We are in a difficult position," my father admitted. "The legal fees destroyed my business, and your mother's treatments are only partially covered by insurance. We have exhausted our savings and retirement accounts." "And you thought that the daughter you discarded would be your financial safety net," I concluded. "We hope that, despite everything, family still means something," my mother said quietly. "We hoped you might find it in your heart to help us, even if we do not deserve it." I took a deep breath, centering myself before responding. This moment had played out in my mind countless times over the years, though never in this specific context. "Let me be clear about something," I said carefully. "When you kicked me out, I was 17 years old. I had to work multiple jobs while finishing high school. I had to apply for independent student status to get financial aid for college. I lived in a basement and struggled to afford food. Not once during those hardest years did you reach out to see if I was alive, let alone offer help." They both looked down at the table. "I survived and eventually thrived, not because of you, but despite you," I continued. "I built a support system of people who actually care about my well-being, not just what I can do for them." "We know," my father said softly. "We do not deserve your help." "No, you do not," I agreed. "But this isn't about what you deserve. It is about who I choose to be." I opened my portfolio and removed a document I had prepared with my lawyer. "I will help with your medical expenses," I said, sliding the paper across the table. "I will set up a direct payment arrangement with the hospital and insurance company to cover the treatments you need. I will also provide a one-time payment to prevent foreclosure on your condo." Their expressions shifted from shame to shock to cautious hope. However, I continued, before they could speak, "This is not a reconciliation. These are the boundaries. I will not have a personal relationship with you. You will not have my personal contact information. All communication will go through my lawyer. You will not contact other family members to reach me. You will not show up at my home or business. This is a financial arrangement, only not a restoration of family ties." "But Brooke, we had hoped," my mother began. "I am sure you did," I interrupted. "But hopes are not entitlements. You forfeited any right to a relationship with me when you chose your vision of my future over my actual presence in your lives." "Can that never change?" my father asked quietly. "I do not know," I answered honestly. "Perhaps someday. But it would require extensive family therapy, genuine transformation on your part in time, none of which is on the table today." I pushed a business card across the table. "This is my lawyer's contact information. She will handle all arrangements. If you agree to the boundaries I have outlined, sign the document and return it to her office. They stared at the paper, the reality of our transaction sinking in. This was not the tearful reunion they had imagined, not the prodigal daughter scenario where all would be forgiven and forgotten. Why would you help us financially but refuse a relationship? My mother asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Because I can separate practical compassion from emotional self-protection, I explained. I do not want you to lose your home or go without medical care. But I also do not want to expose myself to people who have proven they will abandon me when I do not conform to their expectations. I stood signaling that our meeting was concluding. I have built a good life with people who love me unconditionally, people who supported my dreams instead of demanding I live theirs. That is the family I chose, and they have earned my loyalty in ways you never did. As I gathered my belongings, my mother reached out one last time. We are truly sorry, Brooke, for everything. I paused, allowing myself to really look at her. This woman who had given me life but not the support to live it authentically. I felt a complex mixture of emotions lingering, heard a thread of compassion, but most prominently, a sense of peace with my own boundaries. I believe that you are sorry now, I said finally. But being sorry when you need something from me is not the same as being sorry when I needed something from you. With that, I walked out of the cafe and into the bright afternoon sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in years. The conversation had not gone as they hoped, but it had given me something invaluable: closure on my own terms. In the months that followed, I honored my commitment to help with their financial situation while maintaining my emotional boundaries. My lawyer handled all interactions, providing me with only necessary updates. My parents signed the agreement, accepting the limitations I had set. The experience taught me profound lessons about the difference between biological connections and genuine family. Blood relation alone creates no obligation. True family is built on mutual respect, consistent support, and the freedom to be authentically yourself. I also learned about the complexity of forgiveness. I did not forgive my parents in the sense of welcoming them back into my life or pretending the abandonment never happened. Instead, I found a different kind of forgiveness, one that allowed me to release the power their rejection had held over me without surrendering my boundaries. Most importantly, I learned that breaking toxic cycles requires courage. By refusing to participate in a superficial reconciliation that served their needs at the expense of my healing, I was protecting not just myself, but any future children I might have, from the same conditional love I had experienced. 10 years after being kicked out with one suitcase and a mother's prediction that I would come crawling back, I stood firmly in my power, successful, on my own terms, guided by my own values. The tables had indeed turned, but my response was not about revenge or satisfaction. It was about integrity, boundaries, and the family I had chosen to create around me. Patricia, who had been waiting at her house for me after the meeting, listened to my account with quiet pride. "You know," she said, pouring us both tea, "when you first arrived at my door, with that suitcase, I worried about your future. Not because I doubted your abilities, but because the world can be cruel to young people without support. I never imagined you would become not just successful but wise." Her words touched me deeply. "I had good teachers," I replied, reaching for her hand. "People who showed me what real support looks like." "So, what about you? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who only reached out when they needed something? Do you believe biological ties create automatic obligations, or do relationships need to be earned through consistent support?" Leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to protect your peace even from family. Thank you for listening to my journey from homeless teen to empowered adult, and remember, the family that matters most is often the one you choose for yourself.